Thing is on. Roll to roll. I'm not getting any movement.
Are you using the right mouse?
Mm-hmm. Whoa. What the? Oh, there it is.
It's still buffering over here. Turn it on.
Still buffering.
Can you get it turned on?
Huh?
You can turn it on now.
The timer?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Okie dokie.
Okay.
Alright, today we begin with Shemot, also known as Exodus in the pagan world, chapter 31, verse 5. Literally in English it would say, and in sculpturing stone, to filling or setting, and in sculpturing tree or wood, to make in all workmanship. Remember, it's a primitive language, so the word for tree and the word for wood, same word. So you begin with u vacharoshet, and in sculpturing. It is the working of wood or stones. So carving, sculpturing, however you want to look at it, it's somebody who makes things, a craftsman who makes things out of wood or stone, either one, because it's the idea behind it is like the hammer and chisel on a stone, or the hammer and a, what's that? A what?
Awl.
Haul?
Awl. A-U-L. Awl.
Awl. With wood.
That's what my dad used to use.
That's what her dad used to use. Me, I just hire somebody. So you have the sculpturing, but here it says Even. Evan is the name of our grandson, one of them anyway. But Even, stone, a stone of any kind, whether rough or polished, very large or very small. They don't really care. They don't make a distinction. Used of a foundation stone. It's all kinds of... So you get the idea. So we're talking about sculpturing in stone here. Le malot. And that's to fillings or settings. It's to fill, to make full. The original idea is that of abundance, overflowing. To fill as anything does a vacant space with its own bulk or abundance. So if you have a setting on a ring, you know, those little prong thingies that stick up, and you fill it with a stone, then you get where this is kind of coming together, right? The connection, hopefully. It's to fill as anything does a vacant space. So you see, hopefully, what I'm talking about. Then it says uvachoroshet, and in sculpturing, same thing, sculpting, sculpturing, whatever. It's the working of wood and stone. So now here it's going to say etz, which is the word for tree, right? So you know it's also the word for wood, especially of a wooden post or a stake. So we have someone who's a craftsman in stone, and somebody who's a craftsman in wood. Just a side note for the Christians listening in, when it talks about Yeshua, the guy they call Jesus, being a carpenter or the son of a carpenter, that word carpenter actually is the word used for someone who's a stonemason, which is also, as we've just seen, the same word used for someone who's a wood carver. So it could be that he was a carpenter, or maybe that he was a stonemason, or, as is in this case, maybe just a craftsman who works in all of it. Because you know how people are. They start learning to chisel stuff in stone, and next thing you know, they're wanting to try it on wood and all kinds of other things. And vice versa, if they start with wood, they want to try stone, metal, all kinds of things, right? And so it's not uncommon for someone to be a craftsman of many different things. All right, so then we have Bechol, which is in all, Melacha, all workmanship, all craftsmanship. Properly, it's service, hence work prescribed to anyone, especially of the work of an artisan, of an artiste. The property or wealth of anyone is especially cattle. I don't know why that's there. It must be a different use for the same word. Remember, it is a primitive language. So then it says, it's from the root la'ach, to send a messenger, to be sent, to wait upon, to minister a servant. Okay, so the workman doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's a craftsman. Of course, in this case it would, because they're working in wood and stone. But that word is also used of messengers who are sent to, think about it as a town crier, or the cock crowing, because the town crier, given the message, is exactly the same thing as a cock crowing. It's a person, not a chicken. Telling everybody that it's time for prayer, telling everybody, well, here's what the latest from the synagogue, you know. All right, so our translation of verse 5, and complete, the word and complete in stone sculptures and in wood carving for creating in all craftsmanship. So we're talking about somebody who's really talented here. Then, if you recall what our subject is in this chapter, verse 6, literally in English would be, and I, behold, gave me with he or with it, Ahalive, son Ahisamach, Samach, you hear that? Ahisamach, to staff Dan, remember staff being tribe from last week, and in heart, all wisdom heart, gave me wisdom, and do they all that command I you. Not as confusing as you might think, though. Va'ani, so it's and I. Remember, ani is me, myself, or I. Anochi is the word that God generally uses when speaking of himself. Ani is the more slangy version of the word. Then it says, hine, so it's and I. Behold, oh, get your attention. Remember, hine is the word where you're pointing at something on and get your attention on something very specific. Natati, and that's give me. I have given. It's to give, to cause, to receive. A lot of people say they're going to give something and then they don't cause that person they said they were going to give something to receive it. It's not a sore spot with me or anything. This same word is used to deliver into the power of anyone. So if you have someone that is, say, arrested by the state government and they find out that there's a warrant by the federal government, they give that person over to the authority of the federal government. In some cases, you can't really rely on that much in California, I'm just saying. But anyway, 200 years from now, someone's going to say, what? But you know what I'm saying. It's to give. Oto, so I gave with it, and the word et, which points at someone or something. Then it says aha liav, or live, aha live or aha liav. Don't know how would be. One person's going to pronounce it aha liav, and the other person's going to pronounce it aha live. Do what you will with that one. Both are going to be right, and both are going to be wrong, depending on who you ask. The word itself means my father's tent. Aha, with the L at the end, aha li is my tent, of his father. So it's my tent, my father's tent. But that's a name. You don't get anything special from that. Don't ever try to get something special from a Jewish name. They don't work that way in biblical Hebrew. So this guy, Ahaliv, or Ahaliav, it says Ben is next. So he's the son of somebody, obviously, right? Thanks, Captain Obvious. Well, he's the son, it says, of Ahisamach. Ahisamach. Samach, remember, that's the support, that's that stick that people lean on. You see that if actually seen that. I only seen it in Africa, though. I saw some guys standing around, some guys from Africa. They took a stick and they poked it into the ground, and then they leaned on that stick, and that ground, there was a bit of a curve to the stick, but they could actually lean on it as if they were leaning on a wall. It gave them much support. And that's samach. That's your idea of support. Achi is my brother. So it starts off with my brother's support. My brother's support is what it means. Again, don't make anything out of it. It's just a guy's name. So that other guy is the son of this guy. And then it says, le mate. Mate. To staff. A staff is a branch. It's a twig. It's that thing we've been talking about, right? It supports sometimes if it's a really long one, big enough to hold you up. Unless you're really short, then you don't need a long one. But anyway, I'll probably get in trouble for that. So called from the idea of stretching out a rod, a staff. But it's specially used of the rod of a king, a scepter. And a scepter is generally short, right? So the height does not matter. It's of soldiers. They use it of their spear, of a rod used in chastising. And yes, back in the day, among the Jews, they did take cane rods and spank their children with them. And trust me, that hurt. China's still doing it to this day. It is an Eastern thing. And Israel is in the middle of the East. That's why they call it the Middle East. Just saying. It's a tribe, properly a branch of the people. It's only used, it says in the biblical text, of the tribes of Yisrael. It's the staff, the tribe of Israel. So it's of the tribe of the staff of Dan. It's spelled D-A-N in English, but you pronounce it Dan, not Dan. Dan. And Dan means judge, but it's the name of the tribe. It's the tribe of Dan, not the tribe of Dan. It's not the tribe of Gad. You say God, because God is not a Hebrew word. You don't have to put a minus through the O. Just saying, just thinking out loud here. Next word is uvetlev, and in or with lev, this heart thing, and in heart. The heart is the central point of the blood and the seat of life. It often means the soul, the seat of the senses, affections, and emotions of the mind, of various kinds of love. It is applied to the mode of thinking and acting, a sense in which a pure heart is ascribed to anyone who follows the laws of Torah faithfully, and on the contrary, a perverse heart of stubborn and double-minded men are said to speak with a double heart. It is the seat of the will and purpose. Intellect and wisdom are also ascribed to the heart. Understanding. Okay, so what are they saying? In biblical Hebrew, in the biblical world, the mind, the soul, the spirit, the heart, they're all one thing. They are not four separate pieces of one thing. They're not four bullet points where you talk about all the differences between those four things and those all together add up to... No, they're all one thing. So in biblical Hebrew, in the biblical world, if your heart said yes and your mind said no, you were suffering from a condition called schizophrenia. Next word is kol. It's all, it's totality. And then it says chacham, wisdom, skillful in any art. Wise, in other words, intellect, endowed with reason and of using that reason. Wise, though, in the Bible world is from training, then experience, and skillful with regard to affairs both human and divine. That, again, the training comes first. It's not self-paced teaching. It's not you teaching. You don't pick up the Bible like Maimonides did and read it in a language that you don't understand nor speak. He must have read it in some language he understood. He must have had a copy of it in Arabic because he did not speak Hebrew. And he even talks about the fact that he didn't speak Hebrew. And what he did was, when he didn't understand things, was he went, humana, 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 shanda, won't you blow my Hyundai? Right. Because what he describes in his book, I was going to pull it out and show it to you. It used to be right here, but it must have got demoted. It used to have a place of reverence in my house. But after I read it, and remember, I'm a Jew that was raised in Christianity. Born a Jew, didn't know about it until I was a grown man, and things happened, and my parents couldn't hide it anymore from us. But I digress. So I grew up in the Pentecostal church. And in the Pentecostal church was a humna humna shunda, won't you bum Hyundai? And we got to say it really fast so it sounds like we're going, right? I could never do that, so I wasn't filled with the Holy Ghost, right? Because that's what they call that, the Holy Ghost. And the Holy Ghost, it fills your brain with all the information that you're too lazy to go search out and go to college. And yeah, I may be saying it ugly, but it's exactly what Pentecost was. Somebody would go to college, realize this isn't the place for me. Hey, all of a sudden I got a call in my life. I'm going to drop out of college. I'm going to read these. I'm not going to read anything. I'm not going to learn anything. I'm just going to go listen to what some dude says, some pastor says for the next 2 or 3 years of my life, if I wait that long. Back when I was young, it was 3 years. Always had to be 3 years because of the whole New Testament thing. But as time went on, it was just less and less and less time. All you had to do was learn the the verses that mean something to your particular denomination, because everybody has their 4 or 5 verses that are so important to their denomination. And then you have to learn the little what am I wanting to say? When you use acronyms and those type, you got to learn those little things. So once you get those, you're ready to preach. It makes no difference that you have me teaching. Maimonides did this exact thing. This is the wonder child of all of Judaism now. A man who didn't even speak the language, not one word of it. But he said, when I read these idioms, which maybe he recognized all of them, not likely, but when he read them, he said, he just thought about it and he meditated on it and it would pop into his head. It's in his book. If it had been here, I would have read it to you. It's in his book. I'm not kidding you. He was a Pentecostal preacher. And everybody's following that man to this day. And I think it's disgraceful because he was a total fraud. This is a man who spent, according to himself, he spent 20 hours of every day working for the Sultan. And somehow in those 4 hours that he had for sleep and leisure time, he managed to write books with thousands and thousands of pages in them. Right. I think he stole his father's work and stuck his own twist on everything his father said and called it his own. And I think anyone who can't see that's not looking. So I have a problem with this whole idea of stuff jumping into your head. It's not biblical. The very words themselves about learning, and the word Torah itself comes from the root of foundation, in the only way that you can get it in any way, shape, or form is to be taught it. And it's even in the New Testament. Philip, somehow this Jewish man has a Greek name. Philip runs up to this man and says, "Do you understand what you're reading?" And, he's reading a Hebrew scroll, and somehow they talk in Greek. Boy, there were some talented people in this time. And do you understand? Well, how can I understand without a teacher? How can I what? How can I? Oh, well, because he was from another country. And America's not another country? We're across the pond, people. We're nowhere near it. Just saying. Education, you cannot educate yourself. You cannot do it. There has to be somebody there to point you in the right direction, or you will spend 40, 50, 60, 70 years of your life wasting your time spinning your wheels. I know this from personal experience. I spent a lot of time in my life wasting my time, spinning my wheels, learning that which was not even remotely true. Don't do it. When the Bible said find yourself a teacher, it didn't mean just any teacher, and it sure didn't mean find yourself. It didn't say go get a mirror and let you teach yourself. No, it said find you a teacher. And even Kepa in the New Testament writings said that if you weren't trained the way the rabbis were trained and taught the same things that the rabbis, and he's assuming you understand that they're the rabbis from the rabbinic place that he came from, not from another one, because there were plenty from which to choose. He meant that you would know that you should be following what he learned and people like him. And you should, if you're going to get out there and teach it, you should be one of him. There should have been a point in your life where the leaders anointed you and prayed over you and sent you out. That should have happened. If it didn't happen, you're real questionable. You didn't go to college and learn about Jewish stuff, and we're talking about a Jewish religion, you're real questionable. And he said that. It's not that you can't get it right, it's that you can't get much of it right. That's the problem. So anyway, you have to understand this wisdom comes from knowledge. So what they called wise was somebody who was extremely skilled in something. You were so good with woodworking that you could make your own tools for the purpose of woodworking, from wood or whatever else you made it from, but you could think it up, you could work it out, you could make it, and it would make your life even easier. This is when you're stepping over into the point of wisdom. You're somebody who can come in and look at how crooked all the walls are, and you can still make that cabinet fit perfectly and look straight and true, right? You're the master that can do that. Somebody that is just now starting, and that's what you find out there. You hire these guys that'll work for $5 or $10 an hour, and you're not getting the master, you're not getting the wise carpenter, you're getting the kid that was, like the Pentecostal guys that stuck around and learned something for 6 weeks or whatever and went out on their own. Careful with that, because those are not the wise carpenters. But this is wisdom. It comes down from teaching. It doesn't come down from self-learning. But you do realize that when you're being taught, you discover things on your own. That's part of the process. But you need to have someone leading you. The best books I ever, what I used to do when I read a book was look at who they were quoting and go find those books. And one thing led to another. But I eventually wound up with this one set of books that I thought was so great, and it turned out the guy was a complete fraud. Everything that he gave as a source was false. So that kind of was upsetting. But I thought, there's one particular scholar that has never led me astray, and he didn't even know who that guy was. I should have known. But he's pointed me to great scholarship like Cassuto and Flusser, and he was the one that first got me to read Josephus and Philo and those people, and not just any Josephus. He was the one that got me to read Onkelos, but not just any Onkelos, a very specific Onkelos, and there was a reason for that. I was spinning my wheels looking at all these wrong translations of these works, So you need someone to start you out, point you in the right direction. Yes, there is stuff you do on your own. Yes, there are discoveries you make. Yes, you do come up with things on of your own that they did not teach you. All of that does happen, but it's going to be way more accurate and it's going to be way more useful if you have somebody there to start you out and point you in the right way and oversee it, so that you don't get off onto some studying to prove what you already believe. You don't know how many times some scholars said, Robert, what are you basing that on? Where's your source, Rob? That's been said to me more than once. I'm just moving on. The next word is lev. We've already had that. That's that. body, soul, heart, mind, spirit, all that being the same thing. Then natati, and it's to give, to cause, to receive, to make sure it actually wound up in that person's possession. Then it's chama. Now this is wisdom. This is the skill of an artist. Can I just say artiste? I can't say that word. Artificer. An artiste. It's used for the word dexterity. Wisdom from education and experience from using it. It comprehends various learning, also of those who are faithful to God's Torah, because it's said of the pious, if you live according to God's law, you're wise for two reasons. One, you're living according to God's law, that's a wise thing to do. But two, if you're living according to God's law, you've learned an awful lot of wisdom. So, that's, again, a primitive language. They use one word can cover a lot of area, where our language is not primitive, so we have to have a lot of words to cover a little area. All right, so then we have ve'asu. Can you hear asa? Properly, to labor, to work about, to make, to produce, to labor, to manufacture, to fabricate. Right, it's all those things. So he's obviously going to make something. He's not just going to have all this talent. Then this is et, which points at something, and the next word is kol. That's all. That's totality. Then it's asher, which means that, or the word which. T-H-A-T, or the word W-H-I-C-H. Used. You can use either English word. Makes no difference. Then it says zivitiha, command I you. It's to set up, to constitute, to appoint. Anyone over anything, to appoint, to decree, to determine anything. It's to cause it to exist. That comes from a command. To charge, to command anyone, anything, to give commands. I think you know what a command is, right? So all that's been commanded. So here's your translation. And behold, I have given with him, and the him is Ahaliav, or Ahalive, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan. And in the heart of every wise-hearted I have given wisdom, and they will make all that I have commanded you. Of the words with him, which is also with it, even Ezra said that with him meant that Ahaliav, or Ahalive, however you want to pronounce it, was an equal to Betzael, remember him from earlier, as a craftsman, but inferior as an innovator. This is purely mean-spirited speculation. Mean-spirit. It's not just purely speculative. It is purely mean-spirited speculation. That's just ugly stuff. He has nothing to base that on. Just being mean. So I better get on to the next one before I say something mean to him. He's not here to defend himself. All right, so verse 7. In English, it would be an arrow, because the word et starts it off and it has no meaning. So you have an arrow, and then it says tent appointed times, and the chest 2 or 4 testimony, and there's an arrow, the mercy seat, which is what they call it in English, that upon him, it's just a lid, is really what the word means, but we'll call it a mercy seat, and that upon it, and all articles the tent. So you begin with et, which is just the pointer, oh hell. So it's using the general term instead of saying the word for tabernacle, it's just the word for tent. It's a tent, and in this case, we know it's the tent of Moed, which is your next word, the appointed times. And they call it that because, as you've heard me say before, there were appointed meetings. There were times every year, exact dates are given. On the 14th day of the first month, etc., etc., they give you the actual day, the actual place being this tent, the tabernacle in the wilderness, the temple when it is built, And then it gets destroyed, and then they build it again. You go right back to that same place, right? Nowadays, we basically do all these things in the synagogue because we promised God we would find a way to make it happen. So since there is no temple, we do it in the synagogue. It's all good because we're still doing what we said we would do. We're going to find a way to make it happen. That's literally what we said. Our forefathers said to God. And when they spoke for us. All right, so it's the appointed times. It's this place where we go at appointed times. Well, there was a time where that's also where you went to learn Torah. So we're talking about specifically, though, the tent that's in the wilderness. Then it says ve'et, and then it points to something. Ha'aron. It's not Aharon, it's Ha'aron. So that's the chest, an ark, a chest, into which things are collected to be kept. This could be said of a money chest, it can be said of a coffin, it can be said of a hope chest. This is just a box. Then it says La Edut. Well, that's for the testimony. Remember, the testimony is the commandments chiseled in a piece of stone or perhaps written on a piece of lamb's skin. It really, what it is makes no difference. Now, we know exactly what it is in this case because the story tells us. So it's a place where this is going to be kept. It's that specific chest. So it's not Miriam's hope chest in her tent. This is the chest that's in the tabernacle. All right. So it's the testimony. You understand that the law that was chiseled on the stones, the law that was written on the scrolls, those are only testimony. They testify to the covenant. They are not the covenant. The covenant has to exist in the heart. If the covenant does not exist in the heart, Yisrael will lose its way. They will wind up with their temples destroyed. They will wind up with finding themselves enslaved yet again if it's not where it belongs, on the heart. If we cannot get it off of that piece of paper, if we cannot get it off of that stone, we are doomed to repeat our past. Because it's not about remembering what happened to us. It's about remembering why it happened to us. All right. Then it says ve'et, that's and then it points. Ha-kaporet. And the lid, the covering. But it's only used as the cover of the Ark of the Covenant, called in English the mercy seat. So we can call it the mercy seat if you like. It's just a lid. That's all the word really means, the lid. Then it says asher, which is that, or which, W-H-I-C-H. Then it says alav, upon it, the lid that is upon it. Then it says ve'et, and it's pointing to something, kol, that's all, kele, that's articles, properly whatever is made, completed, or prepared. Any utensil, vessel, clothing, ornaments. It's used in the ornaments of a bride, so you'd be, necklaces and, things that are ornamental and those sort of things, though you wouldn't have done that here, except to the degree that God's people are spoken of as the bride of God. So these would be the ornaments of his bride, in that the law is the ketuvah. And you can't have a bride without a ketuvah, right? It's the marriage document. And the Torah is our marriage document. So to that end, the ornaments of the bride belong in this particular box. Then it says ha'ohel, so it's going to use the word for tent, again, not the word for tabernacle. And so this is all you really need to know. You know what a tent is. All right, so verse 7, the translation is, the tent of appointed times, and the chest of testimony, and the chaporet, the top, the thing called the mercy seat, on it, the lid on it, and all the vessels of the tent. So of the words chest of testimony, Rashi pointed out that this was the ark in which the tablets of the law were kept. It seems like a thank you, Captain Obvious moment, but again, in his time frame, this may have been a very necessary thing. It most likely was a very necessary thing for him to say, because he was dealing with people who were largely, what's the word when you can't read? Illiterate. I start to say the wrong word. Illegitimate. It's not what I meant. It's just the first word that popped in my head. Illiterate. So he's dealing with a lot of illiteracy, and with illiteracy comes a lot of not understanding things, a lot of misunderstanding of things that are said, and so it was probably very important that he say that in his time. Seems ridiculous in ours, but it probably wasn't in his. All right, so yeah, we got plenty of time. Verse 8. And the table and vessels and the menorah, the pure, and all vessels, her or it, and altar the incense. So it's ve'et and then it points at something. Ha-shulchan, the shulchan, that's the table, so called from its being extended or spread out. And we would think of, okay, so there's a table that they built in there, and they set stuff on it, right? And of course, that's exactly what it is talking about. But a table can be the ground. Thou preparest a table before me. In the psalm, is talking about the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, and everything's being compared to a shepherd preparing a table for a sheep. When have you ever seen a sheep sit at a chair and at a table and hold a fork and a knife in his hands? I mean, right? But what he's talking about is when the shepherd prepared the table for his sheep, what he did was he went out and he found a good place for them to eat. Lots of grass and all that. Not lots of rocks and sand. You don't feed your sheep rocks and sand. You feed them grass. You take them into the wilderness, which is not a desert. It is a place fit for feeding a flock. That's what a wilderness actually is. So you take them out there, but the thing about taking them to a wilderness is, there's liable to be lots of predators out there. If there's green grass, then that means there's water somewhere close by, right? There's a water source. If there's a water source, lots of animals are going to be coming to that water source. And if there's animals coming to the water source, there's going to be lots of predators coming to the water source. You follow what I'm saying? So you go to this place, and there's probably going to be lots of holes in the ground. Well, the sheep are going to walk around, they're going to step in that hole. When they step in that hole, it's going to make that snake in there mad, and that snake will come out and bite that sheep. Well, it may not kill the sheep, but it's not going to make that sheep happy, because that hurts. I don't know if you've ever been bit by a snake, but it hurts. Worse than a sting of a bee, I can guarantee you that. So what they did was they'd go around, find these holes in the ground, and plug them with rocks. That was part of what you called preparing the table. And then they'd find, are there any caves over here, and small caves where there might be predators hiding in there? Well, you don't go into this thing, crawl around, see if there's a predator in there that might kill you. You take rocks and you close up that thing and try to keep yourself and your animals safe. All of that was part of preparing a table. All right. So it's a lot more than just a table. This is not just a noun that means this thing with 4 legs on it. You know what I'm saying? With a flat piece of wood on top or granite, whatever. But it is, in this case, talking about something of that nature. Then it says ve'et, and it points at something else. Kelai, the vessels. Properly, whatever is made, completed, or prepared. Any utensil, vessel, we've already had this. So this can be bowls, cups, what do you call those things that pour?
Ladle.
No, that pour.
Pitcher.
A pitcher, a ladle, anything like that. And they are having sacrifices, so you might need you a barbecue hamburger flipper. I'm just kidding. They may have something, I don't know. Just saying. You have to have something to lift that meat up and stuff and cut it and all those things. Those are all part of it, right? Everything that's used in this service. Then it says ve'et, and it points at something else. Ha-menorah, the menorah. That's the candelabrum, the candlestick, as they say in English, but it's menorah, and it comes from the root nur. Nur, nair, that's the word they use for those little bitty ones, the roundy ones with the little like you could pour it out kind of a thing, that they put the oil inside and the wick inside, the little oil lamp. That's what it was called, a ner. That's the root of this word. So the menorah would have basically had, every little place it had a branch, because you have different ones. You have the menorah for Hanukkah, and then you have the other menorah, the 7 branches and all that. Every one of those would have had a separate little cup on them for putting the oil in, right? So each one of those would have been a ner. But when you put the whole thing together, it's menorah. So, anywho, you know what that is. Then it says ha-tehorah, the pure, especially a clear, opposite of filthy, as to garments, unmixed, unalloyed, as of gold. It's the pure gold menorah. Remember, it was built out of pure gold. There are all these arguments about, oh yeah, one piece of gold, this whole thing is one piece of gold. It couldn't be that we take one piece of gold and hammer it out and put it all back together and bang it together and mold it together. Couldn't be that. It all had to be cut out somehow from one piece, which I think is completely nonsensical. But it did have to be from the one piece of gold, and so the gold would have been a lot, because this was a big menorah. They would have brought it in, they would have purified it, and they would have mixed it up, and made it all one continuous piece. Would have banged it all out, and made this one menorah out of this one piece. But I do not believe that it would have been, the pieces wouldn't have been put together in separate pieces. I don't believe that for a second. And I think you may remember us talking about that way back in the day. Then it says, Ve'et kol, so and all keleha, all of her vessels. It's all of her, it's the same word that we just had. So it's Ve'et means ba'ach, and so that's the word for altar. Ha-ke-toret, so it's the altar of incense. And it comes from the word for fat of an animal, right? Because back in the day, that was your incense. You took the fat from the animal and you poured it in the bowl and you stuck a little wick in there and you lit the wick and voila, you turned your light on. You do realize that the whole lighting of the candles on Shabbat comes from necessity. Jews have this thing about turning everything into a ceremony, and that's okay. I love the ceremony. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it or that it's evil or any of that, because it's not. But they took what was necessary and turned it into something beautiful, which I like. But, nowadays, if we want to turn our lights on, we go over there and we flip a switch or push a button or clap our hands. There's all kinds of ways, right? Or it just comes on because you have it programmed into your computer that runs your house. There's all this nice stuff, right? Well, but back in the Bible days, if they wanted to turn on their lights, they would make these little bowls. And 5,000 years ago, they would basically be a square bowl with kind of rounded at 4 ends. And then they would make it out of the sand and all that. So then they would have to get it wet and then pour the oil in. Why was it that we had to get those wet?
So the oil wouldn't seep out, because water and oil don't mix.
Oh, okay, so the oil didn't seep out, because it's a very coarse material, and the oil, I suppose, would seep out, and then you'd have potential for a big fire. But so you dip it in the water, and then you put the oil in it, and then in the 5,000 years ago ones, they would put 4 little wicks in there and light them up. Well, that's how you turned on your light when the sun went down. You probably did that most every night, unless you just went to bed with the downing of the sun and up with the rising of the sun. That works too. But if you were going to be up any time past that, you had to turn your light on, i.e. you lit the ner. Don't know why I got off on that, but just thought I'd share that with you. So, verse 8. The table and its vessels, the pure menorah and its vessels, and we are talking about pure gold, right? The pure menorah and its vessels, and the altar of incense. So, of course, for the word pure, Rashi pointed out that the word pure was used here because the menorah was made of pure gold. Again, thanks Captain Obvious, right? But I'm thinking that in his time period, this must have been really necessary. At least I hope so. At least I hope that he didn't do it just to hear himself talk. You know, I doubt that. All right, verse 9. And altar the burnt offerings and all vessels and the pot and the pedestal. So it starts off with ve'et, so it's and then it points to something. Then it's misba'ach, which is the altar, ha'olah. So you had the altar of the incense, and now you have the altar for the burnt offerings. And of course, the olah is what is laid on the altar, what is offered on the altar, especially of the burnt offerings. Then it says, ve'et kol, and all kelai, all the vessels, the spoons, the forks, the knives, the cups, the bowls, the whatever, all of that stuff. Ve'et ha-kiyor. That's a word for the pot. It's a small hearth of fire pan, so-called from boiling or roasting, a basin, a laver, a scaffold, or a platform. Maybe because it's set on one, I don't know. Then it says ve'et and kano, the pedestal. Yeah, because it's set on one. So you have, remember you had the bowl that was supposed to sit on a basin that was made for it to fit. That's what they're talking about here. All right, so then you have, and the altar of burnt offerings and its vessels and the pot and pedestal. So all of this stuff is being lumped together. Then it says in verse 10, and garments the braided, and garments the holy, to Aharon the priest, and garments sons his, to serve as priests. That's Cohen. Ve'et, so and it points to something, big day. That's the word for garments. Clothing, anything that is wrapped up, used of a covering of a bed, because that's the clothing for the bed. And because it pretty much matches the talit that we wear, kind of all came together. Then it's haserad, it's the braided. A coat of mail because it was a braided metal, or if you go back this far, it was, what was that made of? Was that bone? Do you guys remember us showing that picture of one that was 5,000 years old? Was that, do you remember, was that made of bone, I think? I think it was. I think the one, because they found a coat of mail that goes back 5,000 years, and I think it looks a lot like the metal ones, only it wasn't metal back then. It was, I think, bone. So this stuff does go back all that. That was one of those things that I wondered about very early on in my studies. Is it possible that something that the Romans made so popular goes back that far? And sure enough, it turned out to be true. So it's a coat of mail like you would think of, and they're saying it's braided, you know, because it's, I don't know if you can see my hands well enough or not. That sort of thing, you know, it's like woven. Then it says ve'et big day and garments. It's the same word we had a while ago. HaKodesh, the holy garments, those things that are set apart for nothing, for no use other than. The stuff that I'm wearing right now, I only use for this very thing. I wear this stuff when it's Shabbat and no other time. It's the holy garments that are set aside for that purpose. Am I a high priest? No, I'm not doing any of those things. But I am teaching and I am following God's law. And since the teacher was supposed to do this, this is what I do. Right? I'm just following God's law, finding a way to make it happen, since there is no temple, or temple priest for that matter. Then it says le'aharon, which is literally to Aaron, but we think of it as for Aaron. This is HaKohen, the priest. Ve'et, and big day, the garments, banav, so it's his sons, and the garments for his sons, le'chahen, so that they can serve as the priest. Chahen is to predict. It's used of a prophet. It's a They say a soothsayer. That is not really true. But what we used to call a soothsayer back in the day and what we call a soothsayer now are not the same thing. So keep that in mind. That's why the older books will use that word, because back in the day, a soothsayer was a prophet. It has the signification of being a priest, someone who serves God. So your translation then is, and the braided garments and the holy garments for Aharon, the Cohen, and the garments for his sons for the service of the Cohen. Priest, Cohen, priest. The words the braided garments, Nachmanides, and the Babylonian Talmud, which you can find it in Yoma 72a and b, change the last letter of Serad from the Dalet, Serad. They took the Dalet off and added a Tav, changing it to mean service or work. Rashi wrote that Sarad is an Aramaic term meaning a hanging, Hanging, a hanging, or a network woven by a needle. Cassuto said that this verse contains a new item. The Bigdei Haserad, he wrote, the term cannot, according to the plain sense of the text, denote the holy garments of the priests, since these are mentioned immediately afterwards. Nor can it be a designation for the clothes used for the covering of the tabernacle, furniture, during the journeys, in view of the subsequent statement found in chapter 35, verse 19, 39, verses 1 and 41. The garments of Serad for ministering in the holy place. Possibly they were the garments worn by the priest under their tunics in winter during the service as a protection against the cold. To wear them was not obligatory, but optional, since they are not referred to above. It's conjecture, but I would go with him before I'd go with the sages. He has a lot of information that they simply did not have in their lifetimes. Just saying. I think we can do this one more. Verse 11. And a pointer, oil, the anointing, and pointer, incense, the spices, to holy as all, that command I you, he do they. They will do. He do they is they will do. Alright, so it's ve'et, and then you got the pointer. Shemen. Shemen is oil. It's fat, fatness, fat things. Why? Because, like I said, your oil used to be the fat of an animal. Even though they eventually started using olive oil and stuff like that, or maybe did from the start, I don't really know. But they did in fact use the oil from the animals, because oil is oil and it's hard to come by, you know, when you're living day to day the way they did. Alright, so you get the idea. Then it's Hamish Ha, the anointing. So it's the anointing oil, it's not just any oil. Ve'et and Ketoret, that's incense. Same thing coming from the fat of an animal. Ha-samim, that's spices, incense, odors, aroma. Then it's La Kodesh, so it's the holy spices, the ones that are set apart strictly for this business and nothing else. Kehol, which is as all. Asher, that Zivitiha, we've already had this, I command you. It's the commandment, the thing that's set up. You don't get it, you know, we've already gone through that. So it's Ya'asu, you hear Asa, to labor, to work about anything, to make, to produce, to manufacture, to fabricate. They will do this, they will make it. So your translation is, and the anointing oil and the incense spices for the sanctuary. They called it the holy. But what is the holy? The holy is the sanctuary.
Uh-oh.
What's the matter?
It's saying there's no internet connection.
Don't worry about that right now. They will make all that I have commanded you. All right. So we are going to have to stop right here Shalom, be shalom, y'all.
Guess you'll have to upload it.
Mm-hmm.